I had a mentor in parish ministry, my district superintendent, the Reverend William Lucas, who was someone who had gone through a life-changing experience where he was clinically dead on the hospital table, had that experience where he experienced God saying, mission incomplete, he came back. And whatever that was and whatever he experienced also changed the way he did ministry. And so there was someone who was, by no means perfect health-wise, etc., but was committed to ministry and serving the community and helping people experience the love of God. And the ministry that we were involved in was in multiple spaces. It was urban, it was peri-urban, it was rural, all at the same time. And so I had a church that was full of people who had great jobs, and then I had a church in the same parish where people were living in a squatter settlement. And serving at the Methodist Church head office, the presidents that I served under were servant leaders, were visionary leaders who wanted to guide our Methodist Church back into the direction that they feel it had strayed from. And, prayer and sticking to the vision amidst criticism and amidst political challenges. We were operating at a time under military oppression, where we couldn't hold our standing committee meetings, where every standing committee meeting, when we were allowed to meet, I had either military intelligence or the special branch of the police sitting next to me to observe the meetings. These were closed meetings, but they were there. Got to the point where, I was helping them understand the agenda, and they were our members. So, they didn't feel comfortable being in that space. So all of these things have sort of helped and guided me over the years. And I think not only from the leaders, but also being guided by the communities and the people I interact with. We went to Tongaroo just the other day, the community affected by climate change, and Francis from our office, who looks after climate justice, was saying, every time we go to Tongaroo, we learn something new from Bani. And that sort of thing, being open to learn from people you didn't expect to be your teacher. And so I think in that sense, that has, if we continue to reflect, and this is the practice of reflection as part of that contemplation, if we continue to do that, we constantly are going through that process of, we call it the pastoral cycle, where we constantly reflecting, analyzing, and then based on that analysis and the reflection, what we need to do in our lives and what we need to do in our work. So I've been fortunate in that sense, and particularly in my ecumenical theological formation, being able to learn from different faith traditions within the church, and of course try to understand those from outside of the church.
That's beautiful. You've already talked about, how your practices center you. Talking about the three-legged stool and being wobbly when you don't have those practices as a part of your daily life. How does your spiritual practices, how do they help and connect with your current ministry?
I don't think I would be able to serve in this role without them. There'll be days at home when my wife goes, I think you need to go paddling.
Okay.
There were times when I first started when she thought, oh, this is midlife crisis stuff. This paddleboarding is midlife crisis. But to be able to not be so entrenched and focused in the work that you are not able to step out and step away and look from a bigger perspective. And I think that's what we are in this organization. The number one thing is our faith and spirituality. Okay. The number two is your expertise in what you do. Mm-hmm. You can train somebody in a technical thing, but because the work we do is actually quite difficult because of the advocacy, because of the positive transformation we want to model and effect in our region is quite difficult, because we are fighting against the powers and principalities in forms of neo-colonization, neoliberalism, and every other issue that we're facing, existential issues like climate change, etc. If our team is not strong spiritually, we cannot do that work. Mm-hmm. So every morning we have devotion, whether it's 2 people, whether it's everybody. And one of the things that is so beautiful in this place, we have a gentleman by the name of Subhash, Indo-Fijian, one of our security guards and a casual maintenance staff. He'll be the one, and he's Hindu, he'll be the one to go and bring the hymn books, the song books, in the mornings that he's working, to prepare us for devotion every morning. And at one time I pointed that out to our staff, and I said, look at this guy, he's not even a member of our faith community. Mm-hmm. But he knows how important it is that we pray together before we start the day. And so we need to make sure that that aspect is very strong in our lives and in the work that we do here.
Okay, I have like so many follow-up questions for you, but maybe it will be for another time when we're together to have some of those conversations. If there were anything that you would want others to know about spiritual practices based on your experiences, or a word of encouragement, what would that be? What would you want to tell folks across traditions about what it means to hold value for spiritual practice in your life?
Often we reflected, and perhaps this is from, a sermon I heard as a child, but the passage of Jesus talking about faith as small as a mustard seed. Mm. So we've talked about my stand-up paddling, but I'm also I've been the chaplain of our traditional voyaging canoe for 16 years now. And I'm also part of the voluntary crew, one of the voluntary crew members. And one of my tasks when I'm on board, when I sail, is to steer the canoe. And we don't steer with a steering wheel. We steer with a steering oar or a steering paddle. Mm-hmm. So it's like driving a car in reverse, because when you want to turn port or turn to the right, you have to steer to the left. So you're always having to think about, because you're steering from the back, not the front. 2 things I learned from that. One is, particularly often when we do traditional navigation, we use the stars, we use the sun, we use the waves, we use the clouds, all of those things, natural environment. We've been doing this for thousands of years, long before GPS. So when the battery goes flat, we can still sail. But sometimes when you don't have any of that, once you set your course, how do you know you're keeping course? You've got to keep looking back. So we have a saying, you've got to look back in order to go forward. Okay. So it means understanding and honoring the past, even if you are journeying forward. And sometimes in our journey of being church, we always want to move forward, because we are people on the move, going to the kingdom. But it's important that we do sometimes turn back to get a reference point, to actually see how far we have come. Are we still in line with where we are going? And sometimes we make turns along the way because of the reefs we encounter while we are sailing. But we've got to turn back to keep making sure we remain on track. The other thing about that faith is a mustard seed. And this little paddle was given to me by my predecessor. So we've kind of made it the paddle of leadership kind of thing, you know. And in an outrigger canoe that has more than one paddler, you have maybe in a 6-person canoe, you will have 5 who are paddling forward, and the steerer sits at the back, again steers. A small paddle turns an entire ship. A little bit of faith can take us wherever we need to go. And so for me, that's the message. In this particular time, when there are seemingly insurmountable challenges that we are facing, and in the Pacific, although we like to think of ourselves as large ocean states instead of small island states, we are mindful that many times the world sees us as very small.
Mm-hmm.
And so even our smallness we can do great things if our faith is there. So I want to encourage everyone in the multiple crises we are facing, the planetary crisis, the political crises we are facing, the geopolitical crises we are facing, even that little bit of faith. You know, the saying, my grace is sufficient for you. You need to move and know that that grace is enough for us.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I do hope that those who are listening, those who will have the opportunity to be within the sound of your voice, will take away something. I've learned a lot about standing, paddling, and navigating, and all those things. But more than that, I think about how, as people of faith, regardless of traditions, that being able to spend that time daily, or however it is that we choose to craft that time, is important for connecting us to something bigger than we are. And I think that's what I heard when you talked about paddling inside the reef or outside the reef, the vastness that you encounter in the midst of understanding yourself and being a part of something greater. So thank you, Jimmy, and thank you for being on this episode of Natural Spiritualities. And until next time, I hope that you practice and that your spirituality will be something that you'll be able to talk about as well. Thank you for listening.